You're listening to the Wordslinger Podcast, episode 146, Winds of the Father with Beau L'Amour. This episode of the Wordslinger Podcast is brought to you by Draft to Digital. Convert your manuscript, distribute it online, and get support the whole way at drafttodigital.com.
It's the Wordslinger Podcast, where story matters. Build your brand, write your book, redefine who you are. It's all about the story here. What's yours? Now, here's the guy who invented pants optional, Kevin Tomlinson, the Wordslinger.
Wordslinger.
Hey everybody, this is Kevin Thompson, the Wordslinger, and I am back. Did you miss me? I missed you. It's been a few weeks, I know, and it's all because of the move. We for a couple of weeks before we moved, I had to basically focus on getting packed and getting everything ready. We relocated briefly with my in-laws. We stayed with my in-laws for the week, basically the week of the move. And then at the end of that week, we went back to the apartment and gathered everything up and had some movers come in and moved everything over. And it was a great move. I mean, this is a great place. We're in a great place now. This is, so I'm in Sugar Land, Texas. Moved here from Pearland, Texas. Lots of sugar and pears and peaches and things like that in the town names in this part of Texas. I don't know why. But we moved into a place, it's called a flat. It's an apartment, but it's kind of an apartment / townhome. If you're British, this would just be a flat. But this is called a flat here in this location. And it's very cool. It's centrally located to all the things that Kara and I love, including family. We got just down the way, in fact, only about a block or so away from here, are her parents, which is very useful for a lot of reasons. Not the least of which is we have someone, and they love Minnie, our dog. So we have someone who can watch Minnie if we ever need them. We're close to a doggy daycare too, so we're not just dumping the dog on our on our in-laws every time we want to go somewhere. But it is nice to be able to give them a call and say, hey, would you mind watching her? But it's also great that we're closer now to get together, have dinner. We like to do that a lot. We're a very close family, actually. We went to see my mom over this past weekend. We took her some boxes because she too is going to move. I'm actually going to start. This is one of the awesome things about being an author. Because of the money coming in through my books, I can afford to do things like help out with my mom's rent, for example. We're going to upgrade her apartment. I'm going to pay the difference in her rent. I think eventually I'll be able to pay her entire rent. I will get to that point. But to take care of her, make sure she's okay. She's a couple of years from retirement, so I figure by the time she retires, I'll be able to just pay for her wherever she's going to live. But we were able to upgrade her home because of the book money. So that's very cool. We had, over the past couple of weeks, Joe and Kate Russo, who have been guests on this show a couple of times, from the YouTube channel We're the Russos. He's the author of Take Risks, so you might want to check that book out if you haven't already. But they were in Houston, and so Kara and I got to have lunch with them, hang out with them for a little bit. They loved Minnie too. In fact, Kate is, I think, Minnie's new favorite human. So, which is kind of awesome. But definitely go check out their YouTube channel. Check out Joe's book. They're incredible people. I was very blessed to be able to spend an afternoon with them. So that's been great. Now we. In other personal news, we got a lot of things happening here on the podcast front. There's going to be some I think some changes to the way I structure and handle things. I'm actually very pleased with how things are going. I know some of the changes I've promised are a little slow in coming, but they are coming, and that's what's been really cool. So hope you're getting a lot out of that. So anyway, I don't want to hold us back too long. I do have some industry news I'll share with you after the interview. We're talking today with Beau L'Amour. Now, you may remember I actually had a conversation with Beau's sister, Angelique, way back. I don't remember the exact episode, actually, but got a chance to talk to her. And, we talked a little bit about her father and about his work. Of course, that being, author Louis L'Amour, who is famous for his Westerns, but who, as it turns out, wrote a whole lot of other stuff, including some fantasy. But he was, he's a name, a legend I grew up with because of my grandfather. My grandfather was an avid reader of Louis L'Amour books and Zane Grey and that sort of thing. Loved Louis L'Amour. That was his favorite author. When he passed, I inherited all of those books. I ended up donating those to the school where I taught for a time because we had no library in that school. Long story, but the idea was it was an alternative campus. The kids were there because they were being punished, and I suppose one of the punishments was you don't get to learn anything or experience anything good. So I I created a library there and donated a bunch of my grandfather's Westerns to that library. So, and I think they're appreciated. I think they're in a good place. Now, all that said, now I'm real thrilled with this interview with Beau L'Amour. He's got he's continuing his father's legacy and his father's work, which I find fascinating. We do hit on that a little. We're talking mostly about Beau's released Louis L'Amour's Lost Treasures Volume 1, which I had, by sheer coincidence, I had picked up at Barnes & Noble, about a week prior to Beau actually reaching out to me. So I'm very, very excited about this interview. I hope you are too. And go ahead and give this a listen. Afterwards, stick around. We're going to have some industry news I think you'll find cool. And we'll do all the whole wrap-up and everything. So take care of yourselves in the meantime. Enjoy this interview with Beau L'Amour, and I'll see you on the other side. Hey, everybody. Now, some time ago, I actually talked to the daughter of a legend, we'll say. I talked to the daughter of Louis L'Amour, and today I'm actually talking to the son of Louis L'Amour, and I'm sorry I messed that up right off the bat, Beau, but I'm talking to Beau L'Amour, who is, in fact, the son of Louis L'Amour, but he's also the author of Louis L'Amour's Lost Treasures Volume 1. It sounds like you guys just decided you're just a bunch of writers. You just grew up in a writing household. Is that about right?
It's kind of true. I mean, I did a lot of things before I got here, and it's funny, I don't even really identify myself as a writer. I've been a screenwriter. I've done audio plays. I've done books and things like that. But a long time ago, when I first started working in the movie business, I asked a producer that I was working for, what does a movie producer do?
Yeah.
And he said, whatever it takes. And I feel like that's exactly like what I do in the publishing business. And so if it takes writing, if it takes doing this, if it takes doing that, that's what I do.
I worked in film and TV for a while, and that's definitely that's kind of how you have to be. You actually have to be able to do all the jobs. What was the transition then for you from, obviously writing is a big part of your life, whether you want it to be or not, considering your background. But what was sort of the drive behind the Lost Treasures?
We have got, throughout the years after my dad passed away, I found more and more material of his to publish. A good deal of it were things that I either finished or perfected. We published a lot of that material back in the 90s and the early 2000s. Yeah. And I had been holding the Lost Treasures concept out for when the day came that we had to pull a rabbit out of the hat,
Right.
And we needed a big something to, continue to gather attention and remind the fans that we were still here. And the Lost Treasures concept, which I should probably explain before I go on, I think that's probably
sure. Yeah,
I think it's probably the best idea. So Louis L'Amour's Lost Treasures is, and it's not just this one book. It's a whole program, but it's my father's professional biography.
Okay.
And it's the story of his work, and it's the story behind the stories. So Lost Treasures is a program or a series of new books. So Louis L'Amour's Lost Treasures Volume 1, Louis L'Amour's Lost Treasures Volume 2, a novel that I'll explain about in a minute. But it's also a number of postscripts that will be added to the old books that will tell the story behind the story of all those old novels and short stories and things like that. So there's new books, there's reissues of old books that have added material. It's kind of like the bonus features in a DVD.
Okay.
And so Lost Treasures 1 and 2 are unfinished or unsold. So this is Lost Treasures Volumes 1 and Volume 2 are unfinished or unsold materials that were things that we had found and we just didn't really know how to present them to the public. I have some rules about what I will finish of my father's. Unlike my dad wrote a lot of stuff, and I didn't really feel like it was a good idea to go creating new Louis L'Amour stories or even finishing Louis L'Amour stories where dad didn't know the end himself.
Right.
So one of my rules is I don't finish anything where I don't understand the trajectory of the story.
Yeah.
And so these were things, there are a couple of exceptions in there that I might go ahead and work on, but these are the things where the entire trajectory was unclear, but they were really, really fascinating. When you've got a powerhouse writer like my dad,
right,
the material that writer cannot finish is the most ambitious stuff he ever dreamed of. And so it's the most interesting, it's the most revealing. In some ways, it's the most exciting ideas he ever had. They were ideas that were too exciting, almost.
Yeah.
And so, the entire program is an attempt to just show what was going on in his life, what was going on with the stories, to show how stories that were unfinished might be finished, to show how the interesting material behind many very, very well-known novels, what that is, and to tell those stories as well as possible.
Yeah. I'm okay. Just going by my own work. I have hundreds, maybe thousands of unfinished manuscripts sitting around. I can only imagine what your dad had sitting there. The whole story starters thing. You could probably make a fortune, just sort of a finish your own Louis L'Amour book. Just put that out there.
Well, it's he also, on top of the situation that you're describing, where any author will have a lot of unfinished things,
yeah,
he felt that getting down the first couple of chapters was his way of sort of taking notes on what that story would be. So when he had a story idea, he tended to write the first couple of chapters just as a way of cementing where the story would go before he put it away and continued on with what he was doing. So it was his typical way of taking notes.
That's interesting. That's an interesting way to, and I can kind of get behind that idea. That's sort of what I do. I mean, I just start writing the freaking book. It's really
yeah. Oh, he did too.
Yeah. So you've got all these lost treasures. But you're saying some of the ones that you're publishing, you went ahead and finished, or are you actually publishing the unfinished books?
No, the Lost Treasures Volumes 1 and 2, these two new books, are mostly unfinished. There are a couple of finished short stories, and there's a number of finished movie or book treatments in there. But there's also a larger number of fragments of novels and short stories. And so I don't finish them, but at the end of the fragment, I'll do a commentary where I basically say, this is most likely what he was doing at the time.
Right.
This is what he was trying to do with his career. This is what he was trying to do with his story. And for this material, for the stuff that went in these books, I tried to pick things where there was also a fair amount of notes or outlines or things like this. And so I present the notes and outlines. I say, so here's some notes that show that he was thinking in this particular way. Mm-hmm. And here's an outline that shows that he attacked the story this way, but then he wrote these first several chapters and he wrote it that way. And you can see him experimenting with different forms and with different ideas. A really good example. So I'm going to switch to now in the Lost Treasures material that's going into the postscripts to all of the already published novels, the sort of bonus features that are going into books that have been out for quite a while. There are all kinds of different stories. In one, it's about Louis doing a lot of on-the-ground research, basically driving around the Mojave Desert looking for locations for the story, because I had a lot of information about that story, about doing that on that story. But a really good example of what you can see happening in Lost Treasures is he wrote a story called Down the Long Hills about a couple of children abandoned on the plains in the 1870s. Young children. And although the story didn't follow this particular note, one of the notes he made for himself early on was that he basically says what I just said, that this story will be a story about these children who survived this wagon train massacre and have to make their way to safety and the adventures they have in the wilderness. And then fascinatingly, he wrote, and a crowded Western town. Okay. And so although the novel, they are discovered by their father before they ever get to civilization. But his idea was that, his original idea was that maybe their adventures in civilization would be equally as demanding as their adventures in the wilderness.
Yeah.
And just that one little phrase, and in a crowded Western town, could change that story completely.
Right.
And so one of the things that I do in the Lost Treasures material, whether it's in volumes 1 and volume 2 or in the bonus material that's in the back of the novels, is explore things like that he laid out and say, well, so where could that have taken us? What other story could possibly have been told here?
That's fascinating. It's almost like it's like our alternate history books in a way. Yeah. Absolutely. That's okay. Well, I told you before we started recording, actually, coincidentally, when you reached out to me, I was looking at this very book in Barnes & Noble. Now I need to make sure I pick it up and read it. I have such a stack to read right now, so that's the only reason it didn't make it right away. But now I need to rush out and read it, because this is the kind of thing that's very fascinating to me, because I actually in my books I have what I call my stuff at the end of the book, which is kind of the behind the scenes. Like, here's what I was thinking.
Very good.
So it's I'm going to completely steal what you're doing. Like, I mean, I kind of already do it, but I'm going to steal what you're doing, because it sounds like a fascinating look at his work. So you're drawing from what, old journals and that sort of thing, or where's the source material come from?
Yeah, so journals, correspondence, my own memories, my knowledge of how he worked, and a lot of notes made on those particular stories.
Right.
And so, it's also very important to recognize that my dad worked, his process was very much like a improv comedian.
Yeah.
He put himself sort of in the flow of the story, and he didn't know what was going to happen. And he just wrote his way out. And so a lot of the excitement that you experience in a Louis L'Amour story was about the immediacy of it. I mean, he experienced the story just a moment or two before you do.
Yeah.
As you know, as the reader, you are discovering it almost exactly at the same pace that he is discovering it at. Not everybody can write that way. I certainly can't.
Right.
But it is a very interesting and really, really dynamic way of producing fiction.
Right.
And so, there's I have a certain insight into what he was doing and how he was doing it, and I try and tell the best and the most complete story about whatever story I'm describing.
Yeah. So, was he more? I always have to have this conversation with every author. Was he more of a plotter or a pantser?
So explain what those are.
So did he plot more? Did he outline everything, or did he fly by the seat of his pants more often and write just
He flew
freestyle?
by the seat of his pants almost all the time.
That's interesting.
But he did create outlines. He did start stories. He did make little notes to himself that I think only a member of the family would know what story they related to.
Right.
Which has been one of the great situations with this particular book, is that I not only have my own memories, I have my mom and my sister to help me out with that.
Yeah.
But a lot of because Louis L'Amour's Lost Treasures Volume 1 is full of material that is unfinished and was very ambitious for him, that tended to be the kind of thing that he would do more of an outline or a treatment on. I mean, one of the wildest stories in there is a kind of a big sprawling epic that he wanted to write about people who had been reincarnated.
No.
So a lot of this material is not Western.
Right.
It's all other genres, and there's a few Westerns. But he had this big kind of sprawling kind of reincarnation story, and he started it. The first time he started it, one of the characters is a soldier with Alexander the Great.
Okay.
And then he started it, and it's some kind of a primitive tribesman, and you don't know if this is very ancient Europe or North America or something like this. It's almost sort of a fantasy environment.
Yeah.
And then the third time he started the story, he used his own life. He used some very intimate details of his own childhood, and then his young adulthood. And then on top of that, he also, in trying to make this concept work, he also experimented with writing a TV series Bible for the concept. So all four of those things are in there, and I kind of explain the differences and what he was working on and how it might have been better, how he might have succeeded one way or the other.
Right.
So it's
you're putting these notes, you're putting this material in this book as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is definitely a co-author thing. He writes his thing, then I write my thing about what he was doing, and I try and solve the mystery of what was going on and why he didn't finish it. I mean, every one of these, even the ones about the finished novels, even the bonus feature ones about the finished novels, are quite a detective story. Sort of trying to find out what exactly was happening.
Yeah, it sounds honestly, it sounds like this is one of those every writer should read this book, and the one that follows it, because you get to have a very rare insight. Yeah,
it is. It's not. It's not a book. It's not. There's no how-to in it about writing, but it definitely is the inside of the process of a guy who was doing it, and the inside of the industry. The public industry at the time. And a tremendous amount of the story is about the post-World War II evolution into paperback originals.
Oh.
And how my dad basically kind of saved his own life at the last moment. I mean, one of the stories hiding behind this entire series, or that exists behind this entire series, is the fact that he was when he finally transitioned into writing paperbacks, he was so broke that he was going to the park in the morning so his landlady would not know he didn't have enough money for breakfast.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I can see that.
He was basically almost on the street again. You know, he'd been a kid that had grown up on the street in a lot of ways, and he was almost back there. And I think it was very, very challenging. And
see, that's what's interesting to me about all of that. Well, for one, like people, either they don't remember or they never knew in the first place that he did things like write for television or did other things other than Westerns, really. That I love that sort of inside look. And there, I think there are actually some parallels right now with the sort of traditional publishing industry versus the indie author explosion and ebook explosion. So, I think there's something to learn there.
Totally. There is the parallel between the indie ebook business and the current mainstream publishing business is exactly what went on with the paperback business and the traditional publishing business in the 1950s.
That's incredible.
Like no difference, right down to the point where the major publishers kind of look out at the rest of the population of the country and say, well, all those people don't read.
Yeah.
And the paperback business and the ebook business both said, yeah, they do read, but it's price sensitive.
Right.
And, you have to give them something that's inexpensive enough so they don't feel like they're taking a risk.
That's this is such a familiar sounding conversation.
Yeah. And the difference between one point of view and the other is millions of sales.
Right. Yes.
What you have to do is open your mind to this new format, and you sell millions of books.
Yeah, exactly. That's remarkable. There's a question I have to ask, and I kind of feel like I probably know the answer, but I wonder if your father were starting today or starting in proximity today,
right,
do you think that he would still go a similar route? Like, would he be traditional, or do you think he'd lean toward possibly being an independent author?
Well, it depends on where you caught him in his career.
Yeah.
I think towards the end of his career, he saw the frontier, the place that he hadn't broken into, as being the high regard of the traditional publishing infrastructure, critics, publishers, things like that. Yeah. And so he definitely wanted to break down those barriers. But up until the early 1970s, so the first 2/3 of his career, he was very excited by the possibilities that the paperback business offered. And I think that part of his mentality would be absolutely fascinated with what's possible in ebooks.
Yeah. He seemed like he had the right pioneering spirit.
Well, he was a massive self-promoter too.
Yeah.
So he wasn't scared by that, by that kind of thing. I mean, he when he was younger, he would go out in his shoes with holes in them and trudge around Oklahoma City and promote boxers. And,
cool.
He was definitely a guy that wasn't afraid to pitch himself and to find new ways to sell what he had.
All right, so I'm going to be in Oklahoma City tomorrow. So you should give me some places, some highlight areas I should hit up while I'm there.
Oh, I don't know. See Bricktown.
I would definitely see Bricktown.
Yeah, see Bricktown, but I don't know. It's been a while since I've been to.
I'm looking for some places where Louis L'Amour maybe hung out and did some writing. That's what I'm looking for.
All around downtown, certainly the bars and coffee shops in Oklahoma City, and he also spent a fair amount of time. His first sustained contact with kind of intellectual people was at the University of Oklahoma down in Norman.
Oh wow!
And so he had run across a few people other than his older brother and sister were both pretty first class intellects, his oldest brother was the foreign desk editor for the Scripps Howard newspaper chain. And he was also a political functionary of various sorts. He was the secretary to the governor of Oklahoma for a while, and he was secretary to the last American ambassador to nationalist China.
Oh, wow.
And,
these are little tidbits.
No, I know. And my dad's sister was a school teacher and a high school principal, but then much more interestingly, she was the first secretary and first kind of archivist and person who kind of controlled the flow of information at the Stanford Research Institute. And so she was classified probably beyond our ability to exist, but I'm sure she knew all kinds of crazy things, but they were pretty sharp people, and they definitely challenged him when he was around them, which was not that often. Yeah. But other than a couple of, kind of communist labor organizers and people like that he would meet on the, on the street in the 1920s and 30s, it was the people at University of Oklahoma at Norman that first started really kind of pushing him intellectually.
Yeah. That's interesting. I'm not trying to do an interview of your father vicariously here. I do want to talk to you. Well, and I want to know, sort of like when it comes to the way you work, right. How do you, first, I guess, is it similar or dissimilar from the way your father worked?
I'm probably more organized, and
really?
I'm probably less improvisational and less fiercely motivated. So I have to play other games to kind of keep myself doing what I'm doing.
What are some of those games? What are some of the things you have to do to keep on track?
Well, the first thing I do in the day is the thing that I'm really dedicated about. So, when I'm in the throes of writing something that has to be writing, I try to make it exercise when I'm not.
Yeah.
But if I get out of bed and put my butt in the chair in front of my computer and just get to work first thing in the morning, I'll do that, pretty well. I tend, if I'm working on something that's difficult, and this material has not been particularly difficult, this has been a ton of fun. But when I'm working at things that's difficult, I'll often just say to myself, you have to sit in front of your word processor for 4 hours. And you can write or you can not write.
Right.
It's going to be really boring if you don't write. No internet, no other stuff. It's basically.
I like it.
You're going to sit there and you're going to look at it, and you might as well write because you got to sit there.
Yeah, that's kind of the totalitarian approach to writing discipline.
Yeah.
You get bread and water. Yeah, I like that. Okay. All right. I'm going to have to start pushing that on people. I could probably use that myself every now and then. There are those days, even though I'm pretty good about keeping to my discipline, there are those days where it's a little tough. Maybe I should adopt that rule.
Well, there's another one I think is really important for writers, and it's don't be afraid to be bad. It's really, really, really important. It's sort of like, don't be writer's block is more an issue of confidence than anything else. It's not really, I don't know what to write. It's I'm scared of what I might write or what I'm writing, or that it's not good enough, or it's not this, or it's not that. That's what rewriting is for. Just freaking write.
Right.
Okay? When you get it down and you see what it is, you can have a dialogue with it. It's like it becomes another person, and it will tell you if you're alert to what you have written. It will tell you what it wants to be, but it cannot do that until you get it down.
That's right. Yeah. I tell the analogy I use is if you're going to carve a statue from a piece of marble, you can't start unless you have the piece of marble. So you have to actually.
I like that. I like
get the words on the page, and then you can edit them.
Yeah.
That's cool. So, and Now, what are some other things you have going on? I mean, besides the book projects. I mean, you're in film and TV clearly. You got
I
anything?
was. I shouldn't say I don't do that anymore. I'm sure if the right thing came up, I would be up for it. But it is such a soul destroying
Yes.
business. And
There's a reason why so many of us say, I used to work in film and television.
Absolutely. And it's also a business for people who are very taken with their image of themselves. They have to see themselves in that environment, and creating their reality in film and television is just as important to them as creating the creative products that they create. And I got to a point where I was just sort of like, rather than fighting all the time, if I work with my dad's stuff, I can do all kinds of things. So, I have done movies based on that. I've done audio dramas based on that. I've done a comic book based on that. I was the manager of a literary magazine for a while. I've had the opportunity to do all kinds of things because of the publishing connections.
Yeah. That's not a bad way to go.
I'd rather do the stuff than constantly be begging people to let me do the stuff.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's the whole gatekeeper thing, and that's no fun. That's no good for anybody.
Well, that's the beautiful thing also about electronic publishing now, is there aren't even gatekeepers in the somewhat more gentle publishing industry. You can just do your thing. You can
Right. You called your father out for being a shameless self-promoter. How about you? Do you?
No, I'm not very good at it. He was vastly better better at it than I am. And some of that also, that comes, he was never a guy who had writer's block. He had absolute confidence. I think there were long stretches in his life when he did not. And that was an acquired mental ability. Yeah. But once he acquired it, it didn't go away.
One question that just popped into my head, actually. So it's very popular right now for these established authors who may or may not still be with us, but for co-authors to come in and sort of take over a story, maybe finish a story that the author started, or write something entirely new with that author's universe in mind. Is that something you have considered for your father's work?
Like I said, given the various rules that I've laid out for myself within that context, yes. So from the time my dad passed away in 1988 until about 2004, we had a new book every year. Yeah. And a great deal of the material in those new books was either edited or co-written by me. I did not take credit for it at the time, because it really seemed like people wanted to see Louis L'Amour. It was actually very clear that they liked the idea of this just being Louis. And so I did it, in a kind of a ghostwriter form. Yeah. And more recently, I've started putting my name on stuff, because now it seems like people really care. They don't care about me, but they want to know, like, what's Louis and what isn't Louis. And I just feel like as long as I'm getting that message from the marketplace, I'm going to respond to it. So the answer to that is next year's book, October of 18. We'll have No Traveler Returns, which is my dad's first novel, never published. And it is co-written by he and I, because he didn't completely finish it, and it was basically a pile of chapters, somewhat disassociated from one another. It's a very interesting book. It's probably not a book that I would write under other circumstances, but having the opportunity to get in there and make it the best thing it could possibly be was really, really exciting. Yeah. It's not a Western. It's It takes place on a tanker ship bound from the west coast of the United States to the Philippines in the late 1930s. And it's definitely a look back at the time of his life when he was a merchant seaman, and some of the people that he knew and concerns that he had and things like that about that, that industry.
Yeah. I imagine that's going to have some cachet, though, because his first novel. I mean,
I hope so.
Yeah.
It's totally different. It's remarkably different than anything else he ever wrote.
Oh, yeah. Well, your first work, my first book is unpublished. It's sitting in, an electronic file now. I think I still have the original, painstakingly printed manuscript floating around somewhere, but I don't know if I could do it.
Well, I mean, let's hope you can, and let's hope it doesn't take the 80 years that it took my dad.
Maybe
to finally
maybe 80 years from now, somebody will be sitting on a phone call with a hologram call with one of my distant prodigy talking about how they've unearthed this unpublished Kevin Thompson book.
That would be cool.
All right. Well, hey, look, we're at the end of time, so I don't want to keep you any longer. Out of respect for you, but so this one, the first volume's already out. When did you say the second volume was going to hit?
The second volume will come out in 2019. Okay. This novel will come out in between in 2018, and throughout the entire period, there's already 4 of them out. The older novels that have the bonus features in them, will be appearing. So there's 4 out now. There's going to be at least 6 next year. And I believe there'll be 40 of them.
Okay. Wow. Yeah.
Have that extra material.
I have to tell you, I grew up in a household where your father's work was read constantly. I grew up with my grandparents, raised by my grandparents, and my grandfather always had a Louis L'Amour book tucked into the side of his recliner, and I read everything secondhand. When he died, I inherited all those books, and then I actually used them to build I was a teacher for a time, and I built our library in the school. Those books were at the heart of that library, so I donated those when I left. So it's made an impact. I know you know that.
You probably put me through college.
There you go. All right. Well, you stick around. Thank you so much for being on the show. Everybody listening to the sound of my voice right now, we're going to go into the last portion of the show. We'll give you some industry news and other information you're going to want to stick around for, some housekeeping stuff. You may be hearing the groovy bridge music right now, and if so, you may dance in place at will. I want to thank our guest again, Beau L'Amour. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me on.
All right, everybody, stick around, and we'll see you on the other side of the break. Hey, welcome to the other side of the break. So I hope you enjoyed that interview with Beau L'Amour. It's funny. I never in a million years, growing up. So Louis L'Amour, you hear certain names, you experience certain things, and they become kind of part of the almost the tapestry, the background of your life. And Louis L'Amour is one of those names. It's almost like there's not a person associated with it. There's just the legend, And I am not in and of myself. I'm not a huge Western reader. I've read quite a few and grew up with that in my life as part of my reading experience. Wasn't really the thing that captured my imagination growing up the way it did some. But it was like there was this, it's almost like a comfort, right? There's certain authors in your life, certain names that come up over and over again in your life. And because they're there, it's like a touch point. My own father, whom I did not meet until I was 38 years old, turns out he's a writer of Westerns. He's a writer. Is that unbelievable? Yeah, it's unbelievable to me. that we had no contact with each other, okay? no influence in one direction or the other, and we both turned out to be authors. Is that just not the coolest thing you've ever heard? Anyway, off track, but it does kind of actually tie in because there's a sort of legacy there as well. And it really does make you wonder. I mean, we're even without the direct personal influence. There's this genetic influence over fathers and sons to be storytellers, to be the kind of people who would write a book, publish that sort of thing. Anyway, so I hope you got something out of that. There is something this has come up recently as well. With there was a whole story that went around about Stan Lee being abused by his daughter and her attorney, which turned out, according to Stan, is a false story. So if you're seeing that out there, it's not true. He enjoys a good relationship with his daughter. There's no abuse. But it did make me very sad. Made a lot of people very sad to even think of that, because he's getting on up there. I don't remember his age actually, but he's not young, and he's there's a tendency for people to be taken advantage of. Harper Lee is another good example, who, as far as, from what I understand, now again, I don't want to spread false stories. I'm trying to get very good about not doing that by accident. But I had heard that she did not want Ghost Set a Watchman to be published, that she, To Kill a Mockingbird was the culmination of her work, and that there were things happening, some abuses happening, being taken advantage of financially, that sort of thing, throughout her elderly years. And that's it's something we don't think about very often, but we should. This idea that we have a legacy. We're creating intellectual property here. If something happens to us, if we pass away, what happens to these works that we've created? What happens to our legacy in this work? Not just legacy in this work, though. We have estates. We need to plan our estates. I'm speaking to you as someone who has not done this very well. Okay, but what happens? How do we make sure that not just that the work goes on, or lives on, but that people we love benefit from it? What happens there? What happens in our old age? Just some things to think about, and some things I'm definitely going to start thinking about. Maybe I'll bring a guest on to talk about this very subject. But curating the legacy of someone who's passed on was essentially the topic of this show, and I think there's a lot to learn from that. So, love to hear your opinions on this, by the way. You can email me. You can go to wordslingerpodcast.com and hit the contact button. If you're following this show on YouTube, you can leave comments there in the comment section. I'd love to hear some opinions on this. So, now, and I'm sorry I keep clearing my throat. I'm having one of those days. I got some industry news that you're gonna find interesting, I think. First up, Amazon targets Kindle publishing scams, and I mean finally. Seriously, this story should have been a headline years ago. But finally, Amazon is taking steps to cut down on scams and abuse from unscrupulous authors and their Kindle Direct Publishing service. Using their Kindle Direct Publishing service. Amazon has filed 5 complaints against authors who are violating the terms of service, with everything from trafficking and fake reviews to link abuse, which is where an author puts a link in the front of the book that sends readers to the very back of the book in an effort to capitalize on Amazon's page reads policy and the page read fund. Amazon is seeking more than $500,000 in damages from these 5 authors. Although this is going through arbitration as part of Amazon's terms of service, there is still the matter of these cases in court. So I'll be curious. It remains to be seen whether these actions will curtail some of the KDP woes that we experience as authors. But I am watching this. I want to see what happens there. You can find a link to this story in the show notes of this episode, or you can go to bit.ly. You can go to bit.ly/WPC-146-Amazon-lawsuit, and that will send you to this story directly. You can find that link in the show notes if you're driving or jogging or whatever it is you do. Microsoft quietly rolls out its ebook store. Now, authors looking to reach a very specific and narrow group of readers can rejoice. Microsoft just finally rolled out its ebook store, which is available exclusively to users of the Windows 10 operating system. And I'm sorry I'm laughing at this. I mean, it's a new sales channel, and that's good. But to make those books available only to Windows 10 users, it's one thing for Amazon to limit ebooks to its Kindle platform. It's one thing for Apple to limit iBooks to iOS devices, a prolific device used by practically everyone. But and Amazon, by the way, makes their Kindle service, makes the Kindle Reader available on all platforms. Barnes & Noble's Nook is available on all platforms. Kobo's e-reader is available on all platforms. So, you've got a whole group of humans out there using iOS or Android devices who aren't going to be able to read anything that Microsoft publishes because they can't get that on their device. Now, someone has asked Microsoft about this. Of course, Microsoft is not quite ready to comment on anything, but they basically replied in the vaguest terms possible, which means no, they won't offer it, but maybe someday if they get around to it. You can find. Tell me what you think of this. I'm thrilled that this platform is now out there. And of course, Drafted Digital is going to work on getting this platform as one of our sales channels. They're going to have to meet some requirements. Microsoft just doesn't get a pass. Apple didn't get a pass. Microsoft doesn't get a pass. They have to meet certain requirements in order to be included in our platform, and that includes, paying the authors on time and making sure there's no piracy and that sort of thing. We have in the past not been able to strike up deals with certain big name sales channels. You know who they are, because they wouldn't agree to some of these terms. So Drafted Digital, we're out to protect the author. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. We're looking. I mean, I'm curious. You can find a link to this story, of course, in the show notes, and you can pick it up at bit.ly/WPC-146-Microsoft. Smashwords founder Mark Coker, I bet you never thought you'd hear me say this. Smashwords founder Mark Coker thinks indies are losing their independence, which just immediately brings up losing my religion in my head. I almost want to play a clip from it. But citing an ever-increasing dependency on KDP Select, Mark Coker wrote in the Huffington Post that authors who now derive 100% of their sales from Amazon are no longer indie authors. They're dependent authors. I suppose we have indie authors and D authors now, which I think is a bit cynical. But we'll get to why I think that's cynical and why I don't agree necessarily in just a moment. But he does bring up a good point in that if you're 100% dependent on Amazon, just as an example, for all of your book sales, Amazon can pull the plug on you, can change the terms, can do all kinds of things. Now, does that mean you're no longer indie? And I don't think so. Being indie means that you have control over your business. It means you have choices. What it means is that you can choose to do whatever you want with your business. We will always have the capability of selling direct, for example. No one can stop us from doing that. So even if Amazon pulls the plug and you're no longer able to sell through Amazon, you can sell direct to your readers. You can also use aggregators to go to other channels. Those channels, even if those channels go away, you can still sell direct. So that's the point I'm trying to make here. Indie does not mean that you are wide. It's not by default wide distribution. Indie means that you control all the aspects of your business. You get to make all the choices, and you get to use all the options that are available to you, and you get to choose the ones that work best for your business model. And for some authors, that means going direct to Amazon and staying there. being exclusive. Now, whether or not that's a good strategy, that's really no one's call but your own. I personally don't think that long term being exclusive to any sales channel is a good strategy, but short term I think is very beneficial to authors. Especially if you're just starting out, you don't have a following, you don't have an income from your books. This is a way to get an income. This is a way to get a following. This is a way to build your platform. And it's not the best way. It's not the only way, but it is a way. And so I never fault authors for choosing to go direct to Amazon, to go exclusive. I do counsel authors to think outside of that. I have books that are exclusive to Amazon right now. As I build a platform around my archaeological thrillers, all those books are exclusive at the moment because that's how I can gain momentum. And because of that, I'm getting attention from outside of Amazon. And so I'll be able to transition. I've got a plan. I've got my plan right now, and the plan has to be flexible, right? So you have to be able to adjust to changes in the ecosystem so that you can move on if something does go awry. So if Amazon does change their strategy, I'll have to change my plan. But for now, I've got my Dan Kotler thrillers are set up as exclusive to Amazon for the moment. I'm working on the 5th book in that series. I'm aiming to publish 12 books in that series before I start taking books out of Amazon and going wide with them. I may adjust that. Depends on how well things go. Before I hit that number 12. Number 12 is the target number I chose. It's almost arbitrary. But it seemed to me that a good series of about 12 books it does well in other based on the information I have at my disposal, and that I get information via Draft Digital. Based on that information, I have determined that a good number is 10 to 12 books in a series when you go wide. If you're able to do that, you can launch with much more success because you can keep up a cadence and rhythm in releases over the course of a year, which makes readers very happy because once they discover your work, so you can put all your energy into discoverability for that first book. And then because you have more books, and because you are, of course, aren't you, asking people to follow you on new release notifications, asking people to get on your mailing list, asking people to follow you on social media so that they know when a new book comes out. You put CTAs for the next book in each book. If you've got 12 books, you could do a book a month, release a book a month, have CTAs in the back of each book that leads to the next. You can pitch pre-orders, and then change the CTA to just buy the next book. You can do all these things that you can't do if you're writing a book and doing this on the fly. So what Amazon and KDP Select gives me and gives you an opportunity to do is make money while you build up the catalog. Okay? So while you're thinking about, I need 12 books in order to be successful or something like that, rather than have to build 12 books and not have any knowledge about whether or not anyone's even going to like the series, you can build the series, gain some momentum, and earn some money at the same time, and then do a big launch all on your own on multiple platforms. Put all the money that you've been earning on KDP into funding, buying ads and promotions and, getting your book bubs and anything else that you can to promote the book. And boom, man, you got a strategy, man. That's a path to success. Will it work? That's up to you. I mean, it could work. It could not work. But any good plan comes with the caveat that you may have to make adjustments as you go. So anyway, that's one strategy I'm choosing for the Dan Kotler archaeological thrillers. And if you haven't picked those up, try them out. You can try the first one free. If you go to my website, sign up for the mailing list. There's a little yellow banner at the top of my website at kevintumlinson.com. Go check that out. And let me know what you think. Let me know what you think of this as a strategy. I've done a lot of research into this, and I think this will work. But I'm open to hearing other people's ideas. So pitch me. Anyway, that is it for this week's indie publishing news. I'm glad you tuned in for that. I hope you're getting a lot out of this. I don't get feedback on this yet, so I would love to hear. Are you getting anything good out of hearing these news items? Are you, what are the things that are working for you with the Wordslinger podcast? And even better, what are things that you wish you were getting out of the show that you're not yet getting? Maybe there's something I can think about. I'm trying to refine the process of this so that it's a quick and simple production as much as possible, streamlined as much as possible, so that I don't have to take time out of writing and other work to do it. But I do love doing this stuff. There's a sort of weird dread that comes over me especially if I've been away from the mic for a while. But I do love producing this stuff. Once I do it, I'm like, why did I wait? Why didn't I jump on this at the head of the week? So, but anyway, you let me know what you're thinking, and please review the show on iTunes and Stitcher. iTunes in particular, it helps with the discoverability of the show. Go out and find the show, search for Wordslinger Podcast, leave a review, and let me know what you think. What do you tell people what you get out of it? What's the value you're getting out of it? I'd love to hear that. So, all right, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. We're at just over an hour now, so I'm going to go ahead and close this out. Thank you so much for being a listener, a supporter. I really do appreciate it. And, there's some crazy stuff happening in the world right now. We're going to get through all of this together. We're here for each other. You are not alone. I'm right here with you, and I appreciate you being right here with me. So God bless each and every one of you, and I will see you all next week.
Wordslinger.